Hello again. As you know, I'm Eli, the computer guy over here for Everyman IT, and today's class is installing Linux. This is a relatively short and sweet class on how to install Linux. Today we're going to install both the server versions of Linux and the desktop version, so you can just see what the little install process is and see what you get at the end of the day. We are going to be using Ubuntu distribution of Linux. Just with all the different distributions that are out there, it is currently the one that seems to be the most popular. With all distributions of Linux, you should understand that they all have their own particular quirks. Ubuntu is no different. Ubuntu has some particular quirks in Linux that other distributions do not have. Through this whole series, we are going to be using Ubuntu, and just keep in mind, if you decide to use a different version of Linux, let's say DSL or Red Hat or Fedora or SUSE, and you go to try to run some of the same commands that I'm going to be showing you, they may be slightly different in those versions of Linux. So you may just have to do a little Google search to see how it is that you need to run commands. Let's say in Ubuntu you use the apt-get command in order to get and install applications or programs onto the Linux computer. In Red Hat or Fedora you use the yum command, the YUM. Basically, at the end of the day, it's the same stuff that you're doing. Like I say, just they all sometimes use a little bit different commands. So we're going to be using Ubuntu in this process. Again, today we're going to be installing the server version, and we're going to be installing the desktop version. So today we're going to be installing Linux. Like I said in the introduction, we're going to be installing server, and we're going to be installing the desktop version. If you missed the introduction to Linux class, let me just go over this for a second so that you understand what the different versions are. And these versions are basically the same for whatever distro you're using. So whether you're using SUSE or Fedora, etc. The server version of any of these distributions basically is for computers that will only be servers. So this means there'll be web servers or database servers or virtualization servers, file servers, etc. These are not computers that you would be sitting down at and using Firefox to go to CNN.com or writing a dissertation on. The server version of the distributions are for putting onto computers that are only going to be servers. So what happens is when you install the server version, you should realize that these are stripped down versions of the Linux software. So you are not going to get a graphical user interface. You're not going to get a lot of utilities and such that you may be expecting when you install a server version of the operating system. Basically, when you install the server version, when you get done, all that you're going to get at the end of it is a little blinking cursor. And if you understand what commands that you need to run in order to make the server do what it needs to do, you'll be fine. If you do not understand what commands you need to input, then you're stuck. All you've got is a flashing cursor. So just realize that the server version of the Linux operating system is for servers. Again, web servers, database servers, virtualization servers. These are for computers that you're going to set up, they're going to be servers, and that you're rarely ever going to touch. So with server versions, like I say, you're not using web browsers or any of that. The desktop versions of the Linux operating systems are ones that make the Linux operating system more user-friendly. So they will boot into a GUI or a graphical user interface. You will be looking at something that basically looks like Windows or the Mac OS. So you'll see little files and folders, you'll have nice little pictures, you can double click and right click and left click and do all that kind of stuff. So when you install the desktop version of an operating system, like I say, you're going to get something that is going to look familiar to you and is going to work similarly to the Windows operating system. So that's the big thing. Server, you get a little blinking cursor. The desktop versions, you get a nice graphical interface. And also, not only does the graphical interface have Firefox built in, but it will also have OpenOffice. So if you need to write documents or create PowerPoint presentations, all that kind of stuff is already packaged into the desktop version. So those are the different versions of the operating systems so that you understand what's going on. Give me a second, and then we're going to dive into this class, installing Linux. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to install the Ubuntu Server Edition. Now, Ubuntu is open source and it is completely free. So whether it's for personal use, whether it's for commercial use, whatever use it's for, you can use Ubuntu Linux for free. There's no maintenance contracts. There's none of that stuff. All you do is, I'll show you when we go onto the computer, is you go to the Ubuntu website and you download the ISO file from their website. It's about 500 megabytes. And then you burn that to a disk. So you create a disk from the ISO file, so you should know how to do that. Installing the Linux server, installing it is very simple. Basically all you do is you download the ISO file, you create the disk from the ISO file, and then you boot off the disk and hit install. We're going to go through that in a second. That's pretty simple. The main thing to remember with the Server Edition, again, is at the end of this process, all you're going to get is a little blinking cursor. And if you don't know what commands to type in, well, you're kind of stuck. This class is not going to teach you any of those commands. We're just going to install the operating system so that you see, how this all works. The main thing that you have to understand, so you may be asking yourself, well, if there is a desktop version and there's a server version, why is a server version so bare bones? I mean, geez, it doesn't even have a little graphic interface. Well, the reason is in all things computer, whether you're dealing with Macs, whether you're dealing with Windows, or whether you're dealing with Linux, every feature or function is also an attack vector for a hacker. So every additional feature or function that you put onto a computer is a potential weakness that a hacker can manipulate. So like with the Mac operating system, although the Mac operating system is very secure, very hard to hack, hackers have learned how to hack into Flash that the Mac operating system is using, and then take over the computer that way. So although the Mac operating system is just a brick, the Adobe Flash is actually a security vulnerability, and hackers can take control of a Mac computer using the Flash software. So basically, with Linux servers, since these are servers, these are servers that are going to be major web servers, database servers, virtualization servers, you want the server to be as secure as possible. One of the ways you make the server secure is by not giving hackers opportunities to hack anything. So basically, the less functionality your computer or server has, the less opportunity there is for hackers to compromise your system. So that's why, like I say, the Linux server operating system is so bare bones, you don't even get a graphical user interface. So we're going to go on the computer. I'll show you how to go to the Ubuntu website. We'll download the ISO file, I'll burn the ISO file, and then we'll install the server operating system. Again, this is all pretty simple, so just follow along, and I'll go on the computer and show you how this is done. Okay, so we are now, obviously sitting down at my computer. So the first thing that we need to do is get the Ubuntu server operating system. And again, as I've said before, this is open source and it is free. So it's free for you to use, it's free for your company to use, etc. All you do in order to get the Ubuntu operating system is you go to www.ubuntu.com. So Ubuntu, ubuntu.com, and I think there's a whole story behind it, but I forget what it is. Now, since we're looking for the server version, we're going to go and we're going to find the link wherever the link is to the server. Now, with Ubuntu, they're creating numerous versions of Ubuntu to do whole bunches of different stuff. So there's a desktop version of Ubuntu, there's a netbook version of Ubuntu, there's a server version, there's a cloud version, and there's actually a few other versions out there. So when you go to download the version that you want, make sure you download the right one. Desktop is different than netbook, which is different than server. So right now we're just going to download and install the server version of Ubuntu. So we click on server, and you get the normal screen, and then you click on download. Now from here, it is going to ask you whether you want the 64-bit version or the 32-bit version. Hopefully, if you're trying to figure out how to use Linux, you understand the difference between 64-bit and 32-bit. If you don't understand the difference between 64-bit and 32-bit, basically all you have to know is for the server version, you should try to download and install the 64-bit. If this does not install onto the computer you're trying to install it on, then download the 32-bit version of the operating system. Basically, the 32-bit means it's a special type of processor. For years and years and years and years, processors were 32-bit processors. About 5 or 6 years ago, almost all processors that were created were 64-bit processors. So if you download the 64-bit version, it should work on your computer. In case it doesn't, if you try to install the 64-bit and it says you don't have a 64-bit CPU, then download the 32-bit version. You can go and do Wikipedia and look at the difference between the two. That's a whole other class unto itself. But you just pick what version, 64 or 32, and then you click Start Download. And obviously I'm on Chrome right now, and it will start download. This is almost a 700 megabyte file. Obviously, since it's a class, I've already downloaded this beforehand. But depending on what internet service provider you're using. I'm on Comcast, really fast internet, so as you can see down here, it'll take about 38 minutes to download. If you're on DSL, it might take an hour or two. So just realize that although it's free, it is a big file, so depending on the speed of your internet service provider, it may take a while. So I'm just going to close out of this, and then we're going to go and install the operating system. Now, again, since you guys are learning Linux, I expect that you do have some understanding of how computers and all that work. So basically, with this, what's going to happen is the Ubuntu ISO, the .iso file, is going to be downloaded. In order to install the operating system, you need to turn that .iso file and burn it to a CD or to a DVD. Then you put that into your computer. You make sure that you boot off the CD. Remember, even some of us old fogies, we forget that sometimes, and the computer will boot directly to the hard drive. Make sure the computer is set up to boot off the CD, and then once it boots off the CD, you can go in and start installing the operating system. So, like I say, I expect you guys to know how to do this. You download the ISO file, you burn the ISO file to a disk, you throw the disk into a computer, and make sure it boots off the CD. If you do that, the rest of this process is pretty easy. So we're going to close out of this, and now just so you understand what's going on, I am using something called a virtual computer. So this is where a computer runs inside of a computer. You will see everything that I'm showing you, you are going to see basically the exact same screen when you go to install Ubuntu yourself. I'm just using this to make it easier. So I have done the equivalent. I've put the disk into the computer, I have booted the computer, and I have booted off of the CD, and this is the screen that I get. It is now asking me what language I want to install this for. So do I want it in the Netherlands or Norsk Bokmål? Well, I don't even know what the hell Norsk Bokmål is, so I will stay with English. And all I have to do is now hit enter. And now, as you see, install Ubuntu server, install enterprise cloud, check disk for defects, etc. What we're going to do is we are going to simply install the Ubuntu server, and we'll hit enter. I don't know, it's asking for the language again, English. Choose your country or territory, United States. It'll ask if you want to detect the keyboard layout. No, that's fine. Origin of the keyboard, USA. Keyboard layout, USA. So this is basically asking what type of keyboard you have. Remember, this is an international operating system. You may have some Zimbabwean, I don't know, backwards, upside down keyboard. So basically all that was asking you is what kind of keyboard do you have. All this stuff is running. Okay, now the host name. Now this basically, all this is the computer name. So in Windows, you normally call computers by their computer name. Here in the Linux world, it's the host name. So we'll just call it Ubuntu server. So that is now the name of this computer, and hit enter. Oops. Let me go back. We'll just call it server. Server. Based on your present, what time zone do you want? Is this time zone correct? Yes. So it'll ask, how do you want your hard drive set up? Right now,
Don't use the use entire disk and set up LVM. We'll go over LVM at a different class. Just say guided use entire disk. Um, some of that stuff can get a little confusing later. So select disk to partition, SCSI 3. Write these, and this is, it'll ask you, like most things, do you actually want to do whatever these changes to the disk? You will say yes. Basically, through this process, really, all you have to do is say yes. I know you're seeing a lot of screens go by, and you're like, "Oh, Eli, slow down, slow down. What are you doing?" It's like, no. Basically, say yes, and you're going to be doing fine. Even with that whole where I said change it to for the hard drive, guided use the entire disk. You could have used guided use the entire disk, including LVM. Like I say, just right now, I would say just use guided, use the entire disk. It might make life a little easier in the end. But basically, all you have to understand is yes. If you answer yes and United States for everything, you're going to be fine. So this is all clicking through. Now, depending on what kind of computer, what kind of hardware you're putting this on. This can either be a very quick process or a relatively slow process. And that's the funny thing with Linux is, I mean, you could be throwing this thing on anything from the most modern computer, the $3,000 server you just bought from Dell, to the server that was $3,000 12 years ago that you bought from Dell. So really, I mean, that's one of the nice parts with Linux, and especially with the server version of Linux, is you can throw this on literally anything. And for most of the things that you're going to be doing, it'll probably work well on almost anything. Like if all you're doing is a web server, if you decide you want to throw up a little website and run it from your house, you could throw that onto some 10-year-old computer. And I mean, unless you have the next YouTube going on, it will work fine. That's the nice part with Linux is it doesn't use a lot of resources because, again, especially with the server version, as you'll see, it doesn't have to use a lot of resources for non-necessary things. Like I say, there is no graphical user interface. There's no background process, or there are background processes, but there aren't 100 background processes happening. Basically, the server does exactly what you tell it to do. So if you set it up to be an Apache web server, all it's going to do is be an Apache web server. And since that's all it does, it doesn't need a whole lot of resources. So this is clicking along. And that's one thing too, as you will see, as I said before, we are setting this up into a virtual computer. If you are thinking about using a virtual computer to play around with installing Linux and maintaining Linux, I would suggest you use this virtual box. It was originally made by Sun Microsystems, and now Oracle bought Sun. So just do a Google search on where to find VirtualBox, but it is open source. It is completely free. And the nice part is with it is it works well with Linux. I like Virtual PC that Microsoft makes. Again, it's completely free for Windows products, for Windows servers, Windows XP, Windows 7. But it doesn't really work that well with Linux for some reason. So I found VirtualBox, like I say, it was by Sun, now by Oracle. It's open source, it's free, and it works very, very, very well with the Linux operating systems. So now it's going to ask for the full name of the new user. I'll just put in Eli, the computer guy. Continue. Username for your account, so we'll just go with Eli. Choose a password, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Continue. Verify, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You entered a password. Basically, it's saying that this is a weak password. This is a pathetic password. Anybody could hack this password. But since this is just a test computer, that is fine with me. So I'll say yes, use a weak password. Okay, you may configure your home directory for encryption. Remember, what encryption means is that it will actually encrypt the files and folders that you put into your home directory. So your home directory is like the documents and settings directory. in Windows. So this is where, you know, your documents or your application, a lot of stuff gets stored. Here's the issue. Since you're brand new to using Linux, I would suggest that you do not encrypt your home directory. Because if you encrypt your home directory and then you crash your Linux computer, your data is probably going to be gone. If you don't encrypt your directory and you do something dumb, then you can pull the hard drive out and you can recover your data pretty easily. If you encrypt that directory, it's encrypted, it's coded. When the Linux operating system dies, your data goes with it. So right now I would say do not encrypt your home directory. Once you know what you're doing, you can encrypt it. Right now, don't. Okay, if you need to use a proxy server to access the outside world, we don't. Okay, it is now asking how frequently do you want updates to happen. So even with Linux, you know, we all laugh at Microsoft with how many updates they put out, you know, every week or every month. Well, Linux needs updates too. So this is asking you, do you want just like with Windows, with automatic updates, do you want automatic updates to be installed? Yes or no. So either no automatic updates or install security updates automatically. I would say again, since you're brand new to this, I would say no automatic updates. Again, Linux is very stable, very secure. If you go in every couple of months and do the updates manually, I think you'll be fine. So I would say don't do automatic updates, because remember, the automatic updates, if they install and there's a problem with one, then your web server that was just working fine the other day has now crashed. So I would say, again, at this point in the game, do no automatic updates. Okay, now here, we aren't actually going to do any of this because this will be for another class. Within this process, it is actually asking you, what kind of server do you want this server to be? Do you want it to be a DNS server? Do you want it to be a LAMP server, basically a web server? Do you want it to be a mail server, an SSH server, database server, print server, Samba server? All that kind of stuff. Right now, we're not going to do anything because I'll show you how to do that later. If you knew what you were doing, let's say you wanted this to be a web server, you could just highlight the LAMP server and hit the space bar, and that would select the LAMP server. So LAMP basically means web server. LAMP means Linux Apache MySQL PHP server. When you check this, this means it will automatically install all the components you need for that Apache web server. Because like I say, in the Linux world, they don't want to install anything that you're not going to use. So basically, in the Windows world, Microsoft, when you install their operating system, they throw in everything, including the kitchen sink, and your neighbor's kitchen sink, and your grandma's kitchen sink. They just throw everything in when you install the operating system, so it's there. The good part is that it's there, so you don't have to install a lot of stuff when you first set up the computer. The bad part is, remember, as I've said, every single component that gets installed onto a computer is a security hole or a security vulnerability. So in the Windows world, they install all this stuff. It's good for you, but it's also a security vulnerability. In the Linux world, they're much more worried about security, so they don't install anything unless you want it to be installed. So right now, we will uncheck the LAMP server, and then we'll just hit continue. So this is just a bare bones server we're creating. Now this is something called the Grub bootloader. So a lot of people, you know, they may love Linux, they may adore Linux, they may think the entire world should run on the Linux operating system, but they are realists and know they also need to use Windows every once in a while. So what they do is they create dual boot computers. So dual boot computers mean you can either boot into Windows or you can boot into Linux. It's actually pretty cool. You can subdivide your computer, and you can have 10 different operating systems on your computer. And when you boot your computer, you can select between those operating systems. So what this is asking now is, it says, you know, it seems like this is the only operating system on the computer. What would you like us to do? right now, like, as I keep saying, do yes. If you're doing a dual boot machine, that'll be another class, but basically understand the grub bootloader. What it's asking is this a dual boot machine? So we just click next. Okay, so we're now here. Installation is finished. See, that's pretty simple. Just remember, answer yes for everything and USA for everything, and you're pretty good. We'll hit continue. And now it's booting. And look at that, see? Server login. So I do Eli, and I do password 1 2 3 4 5 6. And look at that. That is Ubuntu Server. So, as I talked about before with people who install Linux Server, and then they don't know what the hell to do with it once they've installed it, this is why. Because this is what you get. No graphical user interface, nothing. All you get is something that looks like a DOS screen or a terminal screen. I can show you it does do stuff like top. This is basically the version of Task Manager. So this is Task Manager in a Linux server environment. But we'll go into all of that later. We'll get out of that. This is Linux Server. So this is how Linux Server will look whenever you install it. This particularly is Ubuntu Server Edition. So if you download and install the Server Edition, this is going to be what you get once the installation is done. You will be sitting here, again, as I said, you'll be looking at a little cursor blinking at you, and if you don't know what commands to put in, you're kind of stuck. So with that, we'll go back out to the outside world. We'll talk a little bit about the desktop version, and then we'll come back here into the little virtual computer world, and we will install the desktop version of the Ubuntu Linux operating system. Like I say, when we install the Ubuntu, the desktop version, that will give you a nice, pretty little graphical interface that you'll probably like a lot better than this. So let's go back out to the real world and talk about the desktop version.
See, that's not so bad. Installing the Linux server version is pretty easy. So I showed you how to download the software and how to install it, and I showed you that little blinking cursor you get. Woohoo! So don't worry. In the next classes, I will show you what to do past that point. Again, Linux is pretty simple as long as you know what the commands are. Next classes, what we're going to do is we'll show you the commands. So now I'm going to show you how to install the desktop version of the Ubuntu distribution. So when you install this version, at the end of it, like I say, you're going to get a nice graphical user interface, a GUI. There'll be little files and folders. You can do, Firefox and OpenOffice and all of that. Again, it's a pretty simple procedure. You just click a few buttons, etc. The main thing I want you to be cautious about is when you install this. Like I say, you're going to be like, wow, this is free. Look, I get Firefox and I get OpenOffice. I can do all this stuff for free. I should tell everybody about this. I should install this on everybody's computer. Again, I fully support the Linux project. I think this is where the future is going to be. I think by 2020, everybody will be on Linux, and Mac and Windows and all of that will be in the trash can. But right now, Linux ain't quite there yet. There are bugs, there are problems, there are quirks, there are freeze-ups, etc. So before you wipe your main computer and install Linux on it and just dive into the Linux world, use a Linux computer for a week or two to see what the problems are. Again, I mean, it's come a long way. It looks very nice, and for some things it's very functional. But even compared to Windows 7 or the Mac OS, it's still not quite there as an operating system. But let's go onto the computer. I'll show you how to download the software, and then again we're going to install the desktop version of the Ubuntu operating system.
So now we're going to install the Ubuntu desktop version. So we're back at ubuntu.com, ubuntu.com. There's a whole bunch of different versions, so we are going to select the desktop version. from here, you just look for the little download link. So click on the download link. It'll ask you 32-bit or 64-bit. For the desktop version, generally just go for the 32 bits fine. I'm going to actually do the 64-bit here, and then you just click download. So you select what version, and then you download it. If you don't know what the difference is between 32-bit and 64, do whatever they recommend, and you hit start download. And so as you can see down here, it is downloading. And again, this is 697.6 megs sized file, so although it is free, etc., it's going to take a little while to download. So we'll close out of this. Now again, as I talked about with the server, so I downloaded that .iso file. I burned that ISO file to a disk. I threw that disk into a computer, and I booted off the CD drive. Again, in my little world, I'm actually using a virtual computer. But if you were in the real world, that's what you would do. You burn the ISO file to a disk, throw that disk into a computer, boot off the CD drive. Seems like it should be easy, but most people get confused on some of this stuff. Now, the very interesting part you will see here is you can see it says try Ubuntu or install Ubuntu. Now, the curious thing with Linux, which is really cool, is they have this thing called live CDs. What a live CD means is that the entire operating system is on the CD. You can actually boot from the CD and run the operating system. So when you're dealing with Windows or you're dealing with Linux Server Edition, you always have to install the operating system for it to work on the computer. With a live CD, you can actually boot straight off the CD and use all the functionality of the operating system. So you can, surf the web with Firefox and create documents and all that kind of stuff. So that's what a live CD is. You boot off the CD and you can actually use the computer based on the operating system that's on the CD, and it doesn't affect the computer at all. So if you have a Windows computer, you can put in a Linux live CD. You can boot off the live CD, do whatever you want to do, and it doesn't affect the computer at all. So it's kind of cool. Right now, since I'm showing you how to install this stuff, we'll just do the install. So we will go down and do the install Ubuntu. And of course, it's in English. If you're doing Swahili, then by all means say Swahili. So it'll ask you the time zones and all that. You just click forward. Again, the keyboard layout, they're really worried about the keyboard layouts. So suggested option USA, just say yep. Where do you want to put Ubuntu? Just erase and use the entire disk. Again, you can specify partitions manually, but it's an advanced thing. If you don't know what you're doing, just don't do it. Just erase and use the entire disk, and then hit forward. What is your name? Eli, the computer guy. So what name do you want to use to log in? It's Eli. Password 123456. 123456. Strength fair. Really fair for 123456. Interesting. And then what is the name of this computer? Remember, in the server it called it a host name, and here it's just saying what the name is. So Eli Desktop. We'll just get rid of that Eli part and we'll just say desktop. So this is going to be the name of the computer. And then down here, when you scroll down, this is an interesting part, is you can do login automatically, require my password to log in. What this does is if you click login automatically, then when the computer boots, you will log in automatically. If you do require my password to log in, then you have to plug in a password. Depending on what you plan to do with your computer, it really depends on what you want. Like a data recovery computer, like an appliance that I was using, all the time, I would probably say log in automatically just to make my life easier. If I actually had a file server that people weren't supposed to be playing around with, then I would say, they have to manually log in. This just tells you what it's about to do, and then you hit install. Okay, so after a few minutes, all the files get installed and installation is complete. Basically, restart now. So all you do is you click restart now. Again, the actual time for the process that this will take will depend on your hardware. Do realize you should look at the hardware requirements for the desktop version of the Ubuntu operating system. Remember, the server version is very stripped down. There's almost nothing to it, really. The desktop version has all these fancy graphics and all of this stuff. So this actually does require pretty decent hardware. If it was me, I would require that if you're going to use Ubuntu, the desktop version, that you have a computer at least 4 or 5 years or younger with at least 512 megs of RAM. If you have any less than that, it may not have the resources it requires to run. So remember, the server version doesn't require very much because frankly it doesn't do a whole hell of a lot. The desktop version, you get all these pretty graphics and animations and all that, and that does require actual hardware power from your computer. So with a server version, you can use a computer that's 12 years old. With the desktop version, I would say use a relatively new computer. 5 or 6 years old will probably do fine for you. So now you just click on, click on your name, password, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you hit log in. And now you have something, again, like I say, that vaguely looks like Windows or the Mac operating system. So we can see applications. So your tabs are up here. So you can see, accessories. You have a calculator. So I can click on calculator and look, 555 divided by 666 equals 0.833. Woohoo! You click on applications. You have games. Hey, they don't want to be outdone by Windows. You have the graphics, internet. So you have Firefox, IM clients, the whole 9 yards. You have Office. So this comes with the Open Office word processor. This is like Microsoft Word. Open Office Spreadsheet. This is like Microsoft Excel. Open Office Presentation, which is like PowerPoint. They also have Evolution Mail and Calendar, which is, I will give them credit, Evolution is very good. It's a lot like Outlook, and it's basically Linux's version of Outlook. You go to Places. So this is how you can navigate through your computer. So you have your home folder, or you can click on Computer. So Computer is the equivalent of My Computer. So I click on this, and you'll see File System. So this is the equivalent of C drive. You double click, and look at that. You have lots of folders, etc, which we'll talk about before, apt. So you can double click and navigate basically like you would in Windows or Mac. You can either go up one folder level or you can go back. You can even do icon view, so you can say I want to do list view, and you can list stuff. If you want to use the internet, you just click on Firefox, and look at that. We can always go to my favorite, www.cnn.com. And look at that. We are now looking at cnn.com. Moms to cups. I suffocated my children. Lovely. So that is the Ubuntu desktop version. Again, we're going to have classes and we're going to go into this more and more and more and more. I am just giving you the briefest of introductions to this so that basically you understand how to install the different versions. Again, server version, at the end of it, it gives you a blinking cursor, and God help you if you don't know what to do. With the desktop version, like I say, you get this nice little graphical interface. And don't feel bad if you want to use a desktop version. I know a lot of the die-hard Linux people out there, they look down on people who use the desktop version. Who needs graphics? Well, I like graphics, to be honest with you. So understand, you're not weak, you're not pathetic, you're not any of that if you want to use the desktop version. The difference between the server and the desktop version is the desktop version will use more resources. It does have more installed, and so it can have some more security holes. On the other hand, frankly, it's a lot easier to use if you're used to coming from a Windows environment. The main thing to remember is in the Linux world, most of the real administration still happens at the command prompt. So even though this is a nice graphical environment, most when you really get into administering Linux, you still have to run specific commands. All you have to remember then is that when you're using the desktop version, you go to Applications, Accessories, and then you go down here to Terminal. Terminal gives you the terminal prompt. Remember this from when I was showing you the server installation, and this is where you can run the real command. So if you need to start really hammering the server, doing some impressive stuff, you would go to Applications, Accessories, Terminal. That gets you to this terminal prompt, and this is where you can do the really hardcore, or even some of the really simple stuff that you're going to need to do in order to administer the Linux computer. So this is the Ubuntu Desktop Edition. Like I say, pretty easy. If you have a modern computer, you can get it installed in less than half an hour, and that's really all there is to it. Before I go out of here though, when you do put the CD into the computer and you boot off the CD, you do have the option between, like I say, the live CD or the install. I showed you how to do the install because, of course, this is a class on how to install Linux. If you click on that Try Ubuntu or use the live CD version, that boots off the CD. It does not change anything on the hard drive. So if you just want to play around with Linux, but you don't want to actually install it, you can boot off that live CD and it won't do anything at all to the hard drive. You don't have to worry about damaging your computer or installing over an operating system. So that's just something to remember. So with that, let's go back out to the real world and talk about a couple other things.
So that's all there is to installing the Ubuntu Linux desktop version. So in this class today, I've showed you how to install the server version of the Ubuntu distribution and the desktop version of the Ubuntu distribution. It's pretty simple. You download the ISO file, you burn a disk, you throw the disk into the computer, you boot off the disk, and you install it. It's really simple. It's gonna get a lot more complicated after this. Again, as you saw, if you install the server version, all you get is that little blinking cursor at the end of the installation. In the next classes, we're going to show you what to do with that little blinking cursor. With the desktop version, I mean, as I showed you, you can use, Firefox, you can use OpenOffice. All of this stuff is there. It is completely free. So this is the open source, we talked about in the first class. Open source is not necessarily free. Everything within the Ubuntu distribution is free. You just get to use it. You download it and you use it. Completely 100% free. And like I say, for some things, the Linux is very, very, very good. Other things, Linux ain't so good. But this was the class installing Linux. Show you how easy it is. The rest of these classes are going to be similarly easy. We're just gonna focus on certain parts of the Linux operating system, and you'll see how all this works in no time. So as always, I'm Eli, the computer guy, over here for Everyman IT. I really enjoyed teaching this class today, and I look forward to seeing you at the next one.